friends, and welcome to this week's edition of Roaming Taste Videos. This week we are making Buchteln, or jam-filled rolls. These are much beloved throughout many parts of Central and Western Europe for good reason. They are a great breakfast or brunch bread and are absolutely best served the day they are made. However, they were also really great for breakfast in the days that followed making these. I would love to know if you give these a go, so add a comment below, tag me on Instagram at Roaming Taste, and subscribe for more videos like this.
Whilst it looks like there are a lot of ingredients here, they are pretty standard for rolls like this, so definitely check the caption for everything you will need to make these rolls. Before we begin, we need to place our flour, sugar and yeast in a bowl, and we want to stir them together and then create a well in the center. But before we begin with our actual ingredients, we will want to line a baking tray with greaseproof paper, just the base of it, and then grease the rest of it with a little butter ahead of the rolls. We can set that aside and then we can get to making our dough. In a separate bowl, we want to place our melted butter. 100 grams or 3.5 ounces of that. We want to set aside approximately 1 tablespoon of butter for later. Our eggs, our lukewarm milk. So we want the butter and the milk to still be slightly warm, and that will help that yeast dissolve. And our extract and salt and the lemon zest, and we want to whisk those together until they're nicely combined and the eggs are fully broken up. That's what we're really looking for at the end of our whisk. Once we have done that, this shouldn't take too long, we can then add it to our dry ingredients. These rolls are actually really quick and easy to form together into a dough. We add them into the dry ingredients, and as you can see here, we just need to stir with a wooden spoon to really just like form our dough. But because there is so much like moisture, it doesn't take too long, and in fact, whenever you need to flour your surface, really you want to use as minimal flour as possible, because these don't need too much really. I found it was they were like, also because of the butter, they held themselves together pretty well. So once we have formed our dough, we want to turn onto our work surface, and then we want to knead. It should only take about 5 minutes of kneading, and it really is quite an easy dough to work with. I do need to apologize. I had a slight thumb cutting incident the night before whilst cooking dinner, so I do have a band-aid on my thumb, but I tried really hard not to touch the dough too much, as you will see whilst I'm kneading. But if you can use 2 hands to knead the dough, you will find it much easier than I did with my one hand, which I really tried to not repel anyone with a band-aid on my thumb for this video. What we're really looking for when we knead the dough is that it is nice and smooth and elastic, and that when we press into it, it bounces back. It doesn't need to bounce back fully to the point where the finger mark is not at all evident, or in my case, the nail mark I left in the dough is not evident. The nail mark won't be removed, but it will. There's kind of this element of it has had enough kneading, it is smooth, and the dough is like ready to rise. Some research on the origins of these rolls that I found were originally called like Austrian rolls, and they are very beloved in Austria and also in Germany. Turns out that these are commonly also served with custard or with icing sugar, as I serve it here, but also that the original place where these come from is in the Czech Republic. So it just goes to show you the borders of Europe are very, very complicated, and many different cultures and countries call a lot of recipes their own or an element of their culture. Once we have done, there we go, we do the press test into our dough and it bounced back. I just watched it, although the nail mark is still left. We want to lightly butter our bowl, and then we want to place our dough. I just wanted it says to shake it a little bit to get the base of the dough buttered. You don't have to do that though. And then we want to cover it and let it rise for at least an hour. I found I needed an hour and a half because I don't have a warming cupboard, but you could absolutely put this in an oven with the light on to get it to rise a little quicker. You want it doubled, and then when you take it out, you get to punch it, boom, to really deflate the rising, and we want to knead it for a further 2 minutes. There might seem to be quite a lot of hand kneading for these rolls, but actually, because the dough is so easy to work with, it actually is not too difficult. And I did obviously lightly flour my surface ahead of rolling them out, but even when I had a little bit of flour on the surface, it's so minimal, it really doesn't affect the dough too much. When you are putting flour on your surface, definitely less is more here. Use as little as possible. There's probably only 1 tablespoon of flour used on my whole work surface. Once we have rolled it and it's the nice and smooth and elastic again, we need to actually roll them out with our rolling pin. This took probably as long as it does to knead the initial process, because what we need to do is roll it out to, I'm just confirming with the recipe, roll it out into a 32 centimeter square. So it has to be 32 centimeters by 32 centimeters, or 12 inches by 12 inches. That can seem a little bit difficult when you don't usually roll out a dough into a square, but I did end up pushing the edges together to make it really nice and square. We also want the thickness of the dough to be approximately 1/3 of an inch, or slightly less than a centimeter, so it's 0.8, 88 millimeters, I think it was. What we're looking for is that it's not too thin, but it has reached that square amount, and I found that when I got to that square, the thickness of the dough was basically perfect. So we're getting there. I'm so sorry, but the top of the dough is almost completely unable. You can't see it for pretty much the entire time. There we go. Squaring it off with a pastry cutter. I found the pastry cutter was the easiest option here. And then I have the really lame roller that I just can't show you on screen. So I measured all of these out, basically 16 centimeters by 8 centimeters, or 3.1 inch squares is what we want to cut. We want to cut 16 3.1 inch squares, or a 16 8 centimeter squares of our dough. It's very hard with all these different measurements. And then we get to placing the jam in the center of our dough. This is way different a process than the recipe I found. I found that if I just tried to push the edges together, there's not a huge, I didn't get a heaped teaspoon. I suggest a teaspoon or a half a teaspoon just to begin with. We want to stretch out the edges, and then we want to bring them together, because the jam just went everywhere with my first roll. I'm just trying to save you. And then I found that pinching them together almost a little bit like dumplings. If you've ever made Chinese dumplings, is probably the best option. And we want to roll the base that we've all pinched together into the palm of our hand and kind of shape into a roll and then place in our baking dish. Obviously I had a couple of trial and errors, so that's why there is already a roll in my baking dish, but I wanted to show you once I'd kind of gotten to the swing of things. It's really just easiest to stretch out those edges. With the remaining butter, we want to brush our prepared rolls. You see there's approximately like maybe 1/4 of an inch space between each. In our baking dish, we want to cover those completely with just the melted butter. I found the remaining tablespoon of butter we'd set aside earlier is sufficient here. And once we have brushed those completely, we want to set them aside, cover them first, then set them aside to rise again for approximately 40 minutes. Whilst they are doing that second rise, we want to preheat our oven to 190 degrees Celsius or 375 degrees Fahrenheit. These are then ready to bake. As you see, they've risen a little bit and they're sticking together slightly. We want to bake them for 40 minutes or until they are nicely golden. And we want to let them cool slightly until they're warm. Then we want to dust with icing or confectioner sugar, whatever you call it, wherever you are. And they're ready to eat. I suggest you sit down and you eat them with a nice warm beverage. But really, I ate these for breakfast for 2 days, so they're great. They have been served the day they are made, but do not let that stop you from eating them in the days that come if you have any leftovers. I really hope you enjoy these, friends.